I'm Judy Murray, and I'm often asked, what is a driving force? Well, it's something or someone who has the power to make things happen. I've seen firsthand just how far we've come in terms of levelling the playing field for female sports, and yet we still have so much ground to cover. On this journey, I'll meet some of our most successful sports stars, from football, rugby, netball, athletics, boxing, horse racing, and motor racing, and hear stories of dedication, determination, resilience, and exceptional skill. My aim is to look at where we've come from, where we are now, and at what the future holds. If you can see it, you can be it. I'm on my way to meet Maggie, the machine Alphonsi, the woman whose fearless and brave style of play changed the way women's rugby was perceived. She has 74 England caps. She scored 28 tries for her country. She was also a member of the England team that won the 2014 Rugby World Cup. I'm also going to be speaking to others that have left their mark on the game, and to those who are working tirelessly to continue to improve women's rugby.
She was the one that paved the way for putting in the big tackles in women's rugby back in the day.
It was bigger than just winning a World Cup. It was all the hard work, all the effort that went in the background.
Maggie was at the heart of that. Strived for so many years to lift the damn trophy, to win the World Cup, and eventually they got their hands on it.
Maggie is representative of a huge community who want to be more included in this game.
I think the word legend sometimes gets used a little bit too often, but I think definitely a legend in that aspect of the game.
Welcome to Driving Force, Maggie Alphonsi, the woman who changed the way women's rugby is perceived in this country. Can we go back to where it all started?
Yeah, so I was born in South London, in Lewisham. My life probably started quite challengingly because I was born with a physical disability called club foot, where one or both your feet are turned in, and for me, my right foot was turned in. My childhood was spent going into hospital quite a lot, making sure my foot positioning was right. It was hard, it was really hard. When I was young, I didn't think about it. Growing up, my mum decided to move both me and her to North London, in a place called Edmonton. You know, I grew up single-parent family, so just my mum and me. She did 2 jobs to make sure that I had the life that I guess, had. And it was quite a challenging time because I grew up in a council estate. People who lived on that estate, they lacked aspiration, lacked motivation, and there's quite a lot of trouble in the area. And I guess growing up, I sort of had that same kind of mindset. So when I was young, I used to get into a lot of trouble, get into fights. I loved fighting, especially the boys. I have no regrets in my upbringing because I definitely feel like it's given me, I guess, the building blocks to allow me to be who I am today. So for me, when I was at school, I just really enjoyed sport. My mum's Nigerian, and she basically said, you know, growing up, you're either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or someone in that profession. She didn't really see how a girl or a woman would want to do sport. It's not going to really get you the job that you want. I guess I also didn't see many people who kind of looked like me, so people of colour who were doing really well in the world of sport. And for me, I was really inspired by Denise Lewis. I think that was probably the one role model I looked at and I thought, I want to be like her. She's amazing. I mean, I don't think I can do heptathlons, but I wanted to be like her.
I bet you could.
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of sports I try and be good at. And I think if someone like her, who looks like me, kind of has a similar background to me, has gone on to do something really well, then it's possible for me to do it. You know what they say, you know, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think when you start to see it, you start to really believe that you can be it. And for me, I guess there was one moment in my life that changed, and it was because of my PE teacher, a lady called Lisa Burgess. And I just remember her coming into school and she had black eyes and bruises. And I was like, Miss, first, what do you do? Why have you got these black eyes and bruises? And she was like, I play a sport called rugby union.
It was one of the biggest black eyes that I remember having. It was just unbelievable. I remember with Maggie, she was just She was an amazing young person. She was always the first in the gym in the morning, before school, lunchtime, after school. She loved sport. She lived for sport, really, and people from that early age always looked up to her, and, you know, that energy, that enthusiasm that you see now to this day, that was there as a young girl.
So she played for the Welsh team and was the captain of the Welsh women's team. So to think my teacher, a female teacher, was playing this sport and had achieved a lot, I was truly inspired by this. I just thought she was the coolest teacher at school.
Wales did manage to score, the try coming after a very unladylike 8-woman shove from a scrum 5, with captain Lisa Burgess getting the touchdown.
I think it's done a tremendous amount just by the support we've had today. You know, people have seen that women do play this as a sport and not just a fun game. We play it, you know, seriously. It is our sport.
I think the way the game was played today with entertaining running rugby from both sides.
Yeah.
I think both sides are an absolute credit to women's rugby, and that's the way we want to play the game.
Yeah.
Me and Ben are going to go and have a couple of pints now.
We are.
Also, after that, I thought, right, I want to be the England captain one day, because my teacher is the captain of the Welsh side. I didn't have many people back me, and to have someone who actually genuinely thought I could be successful made me also want to do well.
From then, her passion for rugby just grew. She was into athletics, basketball, all sport, like I said. She's a phenomenal athlete, and we were very lucky in the sport of rugby that she chose rugby union.
So I basically went to my local rugby club, which was Saracens, and at the time that was based in Southgate. Got on my bus, which was W6, took me all the way to Southgate, and I remember getting off the bus, walking to the ground, getting to the rugby pitch and seeing all these women and girls as well, and I was so intimidated. So I remember just walking away and going back home on my first training session, and then having the confidence to go back again the following week, and then just falling in love with the sport. I saw other girls and women, big, strong, had big, strong thighs, and after that I just couldn't look back. You know, it was a sport that really did engage me, and I made lots of friends. If you know the sport, it's very much about respect, discipline, listening to the rules, working as a team. My education got better as a result of that.
Rugby is a game that holds several pillars close to its heart, things like sportsmanship, respect. You see them on the walls around this place. And if it comes down to your gender, your race, your sexuality, whatever it might be, rugby's able to just accept you for who you are and what you do on the field, and then have a drink and slap you on the back in the bar afterwards.
The experiences and the friendships that you make in rugby, they last you a lifetime. And I think that's one of the good things about the sport, and it rings true. You know, some of my closest mates now are guys that I played with when I walked through the doors of London Irish in 2003, way back and even beyond then. You know, so that's what rugby does, and I think that's what makes it quite unique.
You bring out a ball and start talking about passing and kicking, some people are going to go oof. But when you start talking about feeling belonging, feeling included, feeling joyful, expressing yourself, and for me rugby's always been an amazing way of doing that, of expressing yourself out on the field, which results in amazing things like team spirit and incredible stories.
When you went to Saracens, you were really fortunate that there was a rugby club that had girls' teams and women's teams and a female coach close to where you lived. But there was a lot of challenges for you to find the money to pay the bus fares and to get to the away matches and so forth. Tell me a little bit about that.
At the time, women weren't professional athletes in rugby union. We're still fighting for that now. The England women's team are professional, and now across the Premiership there's starting to be that professional mindset. When I was playing, you had to do various different jobs. I didn't have a lot of money, and I never really ever asked my single-parent mum to pay for me to do things. I worked at McDonald's. Didn't eat the food, but I worked at McDonald's, and I made sure I got a lot of money to pay for my training. I do think it definitely helped having that mindset that if I want to be successful, I've got to work. Even if it's jobs that you don't want to do, you've got to do them, because that's the only way you're going to hopefully progress up the ladder.
You know, Maggie was a talented sports person, but she had to work incredibly hard, let's not forget that, to achieve what she's done in the sport. She was a phenomenal player, but that just doesn't happen overnight. And we all know that if you're talented, you have to pursue that talent and train and apply yourself. And she did that.
At what point did you get involved in an England setup?
I got into the Saracens side at the age around 13, 14 years old, and then progressed into the England A team and then the England senior team. At the age of 19 years old, finally got the call up to be in the England side. And I still look back to this moment about that experience. I got to go on tour to Canada, and it was in this big tournament called the Nations Cup. And I was, 19 years old, the youngest person in this team, and I was so nervous. But at the same time, I was very confident and cocky, I always say. And it really did allow me to sort of really push my way into that team. And I remember scoring a try on my first England appearance, and just thinking, right, I don't want to just be a good England rugby player. I want to hopefully maintain this jersey. But it was a really challenging time after that first appearance, because I got injured and then lost my form. And I didn't think I was going to find my way back into that England team, but I managed to do it a year later.
When things like injuries do happen, you really do see how much people are there for each other and how nice it is to be in a team environment. I know, obviously, injured at the moment, and how much love and support I've had from the girls is amazing.
Sometimes you don't want to have people that will just tell you what you want to hear. You want to have people that you trust that will tell you honestly whatever that situation is. I think it's really important in terms of managing your mental well-being, as well as obviously all the physical stuff that goes on.
So let's talk about your World Cup experiences. What was the difference, do you think, being part of all of those World Cups? What was the difference in the year that you won?
In 2006, when we got to that final, there was a few players in that team who had been in finals before and had lost. So maybe their mindset was different to maybe mine at the time, because that was my first World Cup. I'm like, yeah, we're going to win this. We're going to beat New Zealand by 20 points. And in 2006, we lost 25-18. And then I guess the next 4 years after that, we became a tighter team. So some new players came in. Again, we started to learn a bit more about each other. But we didn't really step up as leaders. We didn't really know what to do. So I think that was a big reason why we lost that final. And as time went on, another 4 years passed by and we went to another Rugby World Cup, 2014 in France. The team had developed so much that we developed leaders. We had also experienced loss. And I truly believe the best teams who have succeeded have had epic failures. And those failures have allowed them to learn along the way. We've had various different sports psychologists over the journey of 12 years, but this one lady was significant to us in 2014, and she tried to get us to start thinking about our whys. Why do you do what you do? Why do you want to win a World Cup? And I remember going back to my room and taking my phone and asking myself that question and thinking, initially, the reason why I want to win a World Cup, I thought, was to be famous. I want to make sure women's sport was up there. And then I realised, the reason why I want to win a World Cup is because I want to make my single-parent mum proud. Sometimes when it comes to winnings, it's not all about the physical side of your body, it's about the mental side, and having somebody be able to get you to think about that, how to improve your performance, even by 1%, the mind is quite significant.
Sports psychologists can help the individual negotiate those losses by looking at the whole journey. That gives you an absolutely fantastic learning opportunity just to understand what you need to do a bit better, tweak your performance, refine something, work on a skill, work on your technique.
The work that she did, especially when we were out in France, was huge. And I remember waking up and having absolute clarity and focus, and was so relaxed and chilled. And this was like a World Cup final. And I remember 4 years previously just not having that feeling, and I think it was such a huge part in terms of what the sports psychologist had done throughout that tournament to have that real performance focus, but also being really confident within yourself and your teammate.
We went into that game, I don't think I've ever gone into a game believing so much that we can win. And yeah, there was just an air of confidence around, right from when we got up, breakfast and walking out onto the pitch, just everyone had that same feeling of, we can win this today.
I almost felt like always knew we were going to win that World Cup, because we had such a strong bond that no one was going to get past us, because we were really almost a band of sisters. We really did have each other's back.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
I felt like we had to win the World Cup.
It was bigger than just winning a World Cup. It was all the hard work, all the effort that went in the background.
Knowing what that did for the sport, it was suddenly almost the thing to do.
The performance didn't matter today. The victory did, and there it is. England are world champions.
When you won the 2014 Rugby World Cup, you described the overwhelming emotion as being relief. Does that mean that you felt a huge amount of mental pressure going through your career to get to the top, to stay at the top, to be a role model, a leader?
There was a lot of pressure. That journey was 12 years, so if anything, I felt like I had a big chip on my shoulder. There was a lot at stake. I felt like we had to win the World Cup to ensure that we had people still believing in us as a team, but also women's rugby, that we could be the best in the world.
There were many in that team who'd been there 4 years before and several years before that, that really you felt needed to take that opportunity, having come so close 4 years earlier.
It was bigger than just winning a World Cup. It was all the hard work, all the effort that went in the background to get them to that point.
I remember, again, talking to my sports psychologist about it, and I remember her telling me that a really good quote by Billie Jean King, pressure is a privilege. And I've stuck with that, you know, that whole analogy. I actually learned to thrive with pressure, learn to embrace it rather than see it as a worry or a stress. And I started to lose the love for rugby because the pressure was getting a bit too much. So when we won it, I did feel the relief because I was like, right, I can now go home and feel like it's all been worth it.
Just talking about it, it makes me feel just a little bit, it's so, just recalling that day is so meaningful to me. I remember the tension, it was a really tight game, and I remember Emily Scarrett scoring a try quite late on, and the relief.
Emily Scarrett! Emily Scarrett is going to go all the way!
I remember watching the game, and it was incredible. And it sent memories back to when, you know, we had that successful time. And
we had our time in 2003, and knowing what that did for the sport, just to being able to see people walking around the street in rugby shirts, not because they support rugby, but because it suddenly transcended that barrier. It was suddenly almost the thing to do.
We aspire to play for our country, but then we aspire to be winners for our country as well, to go on and to have those unforgettable memories, those things that nobody can ever take away from you. And you can see the smiles on the girls' faces lifting that trophy. I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful moment for sport in England in general.
Maggie was at the heart of that, strived for so many years to lift the damn trophy, to win the World Cup, and eventually they got their hands on it, and thoroughly deserved. And it was a culmination. I say culmination now because the journey is still ongoing, but it was just a reward for an insane amount of hard work in the mid-80s, early 90s that was picked up and run with by some really special people.
It was just phenomenal. It was, you know, I had, there was Maggie, obviously, the young girl that I taught, you know, and there she is, winning, you know, holding up a World Cup. And it was just a massive wave of emotion for me. You know, the next morning then, Maggie sent me a text just saying, thank you, miss. And when I got that, you know, that was something special. And yeah.
After that, I genuinely believe the perception of women's rugby changed. You know, we were named BBC Sports Personality Team of the Year after that. We were the first female sports team to actually win that award, and to be a rugby team, which people thought women didn't play rugby, was huge, absolutely huge.
This is a massive turning point for women's sport. Team of the Year is exactly that. It's about a team, and these are a phenomenal group of people that have worked there so hard to achieve this. So this is for you guys.
Katie, brilliantly said and brilliantly recognising the legacy and what it means for women's sport and women's rugby. England Women's Rugby World Cup winning team, our Team of the Year.
It was everywhere, and that's when, you know, you think to yourself, right, this is what we've got to capture, this is what we've got to bottle. We've got to keep it on the front pages, we've got to keep it in the news. And for me, that's the biggest impact that 2014 victory had. It put women's rugby up the agenda so that one day, in the not too distant future, we fill this stadium for Women's International.
It just inspired women and showed a lot of women that were very different shapes and sizes that you can be a part of it, because it's also, you can be small and quick and be very, very good at rugby. And that was shown by the girls that, you know, women that won the World Cup in 2014.
I think it allowed people to see the beauty of that team spirit for girls and women in sport as well, to make it the thing to do.
That was visibility of the highest order when England women went and did the greatest thing that they've done. And she was also the only black player in that field, and you've got to remember that as well, because she did it at a period where media interest and exposure was still in its relative infancy over the women's game.
I retired after that, so I felt like me as an individual and many of our teammates, we felt like we were leaving the jersey hopefully in a good place for the next young generation to come through and take it on to another level.
Is that what prompted your retirement, or was your knee injury a contributory factor to that?
During that 20-month period, I didn't think I'd play rugby again. I felt depressed. I felt like I was on my own. I didn't want to talk to any other athletes about my challenges. I knew that I had to get back into this England team, but I couldn't really walk properly. And if anything, I was really driven by the fact that I wanted to achieve this goal of winning the World Cup. That kept me going. And the best thing about that 20-month period was that my mind got stronger. Like, I truly believed in myself. So when I retired, I was like, oh, God, I've now got to be a non-rugby player. I didn't know how to really sort of introduce myself to people. It took a while to figure out who was Maggie Alphonsi.
For me, I've always been a massive advocate of understanding that there's a bigger world outside of sport as well. So knowing that once that sport finishes, there's actually a lot out there that you can do instead of that, and things that you can do not only to progress yourself, but your career, and also have different hobbies in that.
That transition into the real world, as we say, it can be really tough, because rugby provides you with so many good things, that culture, that community, those friendships, and then all of a sudden you can lose that and feel a bit lost with it. So the more work you put into that, the better.
One of the things that we have to be really careful of across the whole of sport, men's and women's, is to really help our athletes to be whole people, to live whole lives. And so when adversity comes up, when they reach the end of their career, whatever it might be, they've got things to fall back on, and they've got a real sense of who they are and what they want to achieve.
I found that transition challenging, and I really had to lean on a lot of people to try and find my new identity, but I definitely learned a lot about myself finding a life in broadcasting.
It still remains the same. This player, their job is to dip. They have to dip. And what we saw from the first contact situation was he led with his right shoulder, his head was facing away, and it went straight into above shoulder, more to the neck area.
You were the first female pundit on a men's rugby World Cup. Were you easily accepted in that role?
To be talking about men's rugby, at the time I felt really like a fraud. You can be a great rugby player, but it's different being a good pundit or a good commentator. It's a different skill. And actually, when I was growing up, I had a bit of a stammer. I would speak very quickly, I'd stumble over my words. And I knew going into broadcasting, you have to be very good at the way you speak. So I thought, right, I'm going to invest in elocution lessons. And coming from North London, I had a real bit of a Cockney accent, and I dropped my T's and all that. And I also hired a broadcasting coach to help me presenting myself in front of the TV, understanding more about production. But I just fell in love with the role. I felt like I was like being a coach. My mum was watching. I want to better educate her, or there's people who don't know the sport well. I want to educate them, and I want them to feel like the sport is a sport I understand now.
She's almost the same player, but just doing something different. There's a desire to make the most of everything she says, everything she sees. I think there's a real intensity to it. It's important that if there's people that are tuning in and want to hear, then how you hold yourself and represent yourself is going to mirror how you see those people. And I think she regards everyone watching as equally important.
I remember turning on one time and she's there doing Ninja Warrior. She took it to that next level. She's got that personality, and her career speaks for itself. And now you can see her. You turn the TV on, she's always there. She's getting the massive appointments of commentating on World Cups and commentating on Champions Cup finals, and every big game she's there.
What about your social life?
Social life, Judy.
What is
athletes
that?
don't have social life. I mean, growing up, people always say to me, did you have to make sacrifices? And now that I'm older, I look back at it and go, well, there weren't sacrifices, there were choices. But the people who made the sacrifices were, my family members, my friends. They're the ones who gave up everything to allow me to be the athlete. But it was hard when you're young, because all your friends want to socialise. They want to go out clubbing, discotheque, whatever you want to call it. They want to go out and do those kind of things.
Showing your age there.
Showing my age. It's funny growing up as an athlete, not saying you don't enjoy yourself, but you just think about the destination, when really now I try and appreciate the journey. I'm also a mother. With my partner, I have a beautiful boy called Maggie Alphonsi, and I keep telling people he's going to be the next England rugby captain. He's got the thighs for it, I tell you that. But it's definitely presented different challenges. I've just learnt more about myself as a parent. It's about making sure that he has the best life and actually providing for him.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
The thing that I did go up against quite regularly was, you're a woman, you shouldn't be playing the sport, or you're a woman, what do you know about the sport?
Just because we were born female, we were born a woman, doesn't mean we're any deserving than anyone else.
Did you face sexism and discrimination along the way?
I experienced a lot of sexism. The thing that I did go up against quite regularly was, you're a woman, you shouldn't be playing the sport, or you're a woman, what do you know about the sport? If I'm honest, I still sometimes get a bit of that every now and again, especially working in broadcasting. But that was the hardest bit, I think, for me when I was young, and trying to fight those battles, you know, being a girl or a woman and trying to come to your rugby club and, you know, getting the back pitch, which had, unfortunately, dogs poo everywhere, or, you know, there wasn't very good lighting.
Sexism is a really interesting thing, right? Because it's based on fear, just as racism is, and it's based on ignorance. And it's based on the premise that women are the weaker sex. Well, if women give birth to nations, how is it possible that they're the weaker sex? Women give birth to men. And they should be given the same equal opportunities that men have.
We always felt like a second class, like you're trying to fight to get recognised in your sporting club. And unfortunately, I know a lot of women and girls do still go through experience like that.
A lot of girls, especially sort of my age group, when they start, they have to play with the boys, and quite often they're the only girl there, which obviously for a young girl, it's quite intimidating.
There weren't really any girls-only rugby activity to be involved in. Some of the teams we played, well, when we turned up, almost like, oh, well, you can't play, you're a girl.
Thankfully, times have changed, because you're not having to always fight hard, and now people, you know, really see it's a benefit having women or girls at their sporting facilities.
We wanted to take the game from the amateur era to the professional era. And what we've done is we've invested in people and bringing in the skilled practitioners that we need to make those female players good to great. And it's been fantastic to see some of those players that maybe started off playing rugby as a hobby, now seeing women's rugby as a viable profession for later on in life.
My sister and I started playing rugby when we were 6 years old. Back then, we were two of the only girls in the whole section. The clubs now, the grassroots sides, are more supportive of the girls, and they're trying to grow their own sections, and now it's very rare you can get to a rugby club and they haven't got a girls or a ladies section.
We're going into the world where the woman has the power to decide and to choose. If their dream is playing professionally, why not? Given the channels, given the way, the pathway where they can actually fulfill their dreams.
It's about a sport, not about the gender. I always tried to make sure that was my sort of goal. And I guess me being of a different colour, I never really thought about it again, because I didn't really experience racism. If anything, I've experienced more racism now that I'm out of the sport, working in broadcasting, when you get, unfortunately, you know, you're open to public scrutiny. What's good now, I think the sport is definitely starting to go down that route of being more diverse, especially in men's rugby. You know, if we look at the England men's team, I think 35% of their team is definitely diverse. The women's team probably still needs work. That's why I guess that's my goal, to make sure that hopefully people of different diverse backgrounds see people like me or various different types of people and go, I can play that sport. And they don't just see it as a sport that's for a particular person or a particular stereotype.
You had a role with the Youth Sport Trust, which I would love to hear more about.
An organisation I have so much passion for. And I met so many interesting kids who changed my life, and there's still this one young person who I have a good relationship with because I'm still tracking his journey.
Is that Wayne?
That is correct, Wayne Instraw. If I still think about his journey, it makes me quite emotional. I was teaching rugby, and one young boy kept coming up to me and saying, Miss, I love rugby, and my dad loves rugby too. And I remember talking to his teacher after and just saying, can you tell me a bit more about this young man? And the teacher said to me, he has been on a real journey. He would come into school, he was getting bullied and picked on, so we then put him into a special unit at the school because his confidence was knocked. And then, unfortunately, his dad passed away. So when he said to me, my dad loves rugby, I had no connection about his journey. And now this young man has basically continued with rugby, has now gone on this huge, he's learnt more about himself. So it makes me realise that one person can change so many people's lives. And, I did that for him, but he's been a huge part in my journey. And I still look to him for, if anything, inspiration, because it reminds me that we can all have an impact on somebody, and he's now doing well and inspiring many other kids. How we create real change is actually being a very good leader. The people who make the big decisions are the ones that are at the very top. I guess I have my aspirations to one day be the president of the Rugby Football Union. Love to be CEO, that'd be my main big job, but I really want to be a successful leader.
She knows how the RFU governing body works. She wants to give back. She's a phenomenally good role model, and the RFU would be daft if they didn't want her as president of the RFU.
Having someone like her means that other people can look at rugby and go, I can be like her. She's not just the face of women's rugby, but the face of rugby would be so good for the sport for moving it forwards.
Having women who are qualified and experienced enough to make a difference when they get into these positions requires a career pathway and investment in opportunities on that pathway so that more women come up and are able to make a difference when they get there.
We do have diversity in leadership roles. You do get inspired when you see another woman in those roles, or person of colour, because I think, I can get there, and that's the main thing. I want to hopefully be one of many, not just one on my own.
It continues that idea of see it and be it for anybody. I know that African Americans in the States started to dream differently after Barack Obama became president there, and while president of the United States and president of the RFU are not perhaps the same job, I think the visibility is still the same in terms of what it can inspire to those people that might one day see themselves in that kind of position.
Maggie is representative of a huge community who want to be more included in this game, so I think her influence in that role could be huge, and I think it's only going to make rugby in England as a whole better. I think she's perfectly placed to go on and do that.
Is that one of the reasons that led you to find a place on the RFU Council, where you were one of a handful of women and the only person of colour when you joined in 2016?
At the time, our president of the RFU, a guy called Jason Leonard, who is one of the most capped England men players, he said to me, Maggie, look, there's an opportunity coming up to be a national member on the council. Would you be interested?
I felt we were lacking diversity in a number of areas, and Maggie's such a wonderful person that her knowledge of rugby and her standing within the game just inspires so many people. And also she's got a voice. People want to hear what she says or what her opinion is.
Idea of wearing a blazer, it sounds quite boring, doesn't seem my kind of thing. And I went away and thought about it, and I thought, well, I really want to shape the game. I really want to have an impact. And sometimes if you want to have an impact, you have to be in the room. You have to have a voice.
Got to get inside, haven't you?
Totally. And in 2016 became a council member. And at the time, I was the youngest person and the only person of colour. We want to see diversity in terms of, race, faith, sexuality, etc. When you start to have variety, you have a better representation of your members.
Diversity of opinion, diversity of sport is vital, and also the athletes have a view because they're the ones that you're doing this for in many cases. I am a huge believer in having collective thought and making sure your decisions are informed decisions.
For me, when I started playing rugby, I didn't see many people that looked like me, so that didn't encourage me to play. The likes of Maggie Alphonsi, seeing her playing for England and smashing it, that really encouraged me and made me believe that I actually belong in rugby and have a space for me. My ultimate goal is to be the first black Muslim woman to play for England, and it's a massive, massive goal. I want people to look at me and believe they can also achieve their dreams. Studs in the Mud is a project that I founded about 3 years ago. To be able to give them rugby ball and give them the rugby values and a chance to express themselves through rugby, it's a passion of mine. So essentially using the power of rugby to help change their lives for the better.
One of the big reasons for dropout when I started out in coaching was girls, as their bodies developed, becoming more self-conscious, not wanting to get involved in sport because I don't want to get sweaty, don't want to get my hair wet, I don't want to develop muscles, I don't want to look manly. Now it's gone the other way. I want muscles, I want to look strong, I want to look powerful. Have you found that has changed in the years that you've been involved?
When I was really young, unfortunately, the people I surrounded myself with saw it as, having big thighs and big arms is not a good thing, and actually you should really hide it. So it was quite a negative perception of being a girl at that time. When I found rugby, the coaches looked at me and perceived me in a different way. They would be like, wow, you've got big thighs, wow, you've got big arms, you're impressive, you've got the body that will allow you to be successful. And it was the first time people sort of looked at me and thought, your body is a tool and it can be used in such a positive way, and actually be proud of that. And I look back now and I think, God, I can't believe I was so worried about my body. Now, there's so many role models out there who are different. They're big, they're small, they've got big arms, they've got big thighs, they've got small thighs. I love it now when I see young girls who go, I want to be the next whatever female rugby player. I want to be like them. I want to be, like their same body shape.
It's about being proud of your body and being, accepting that actually the way it is and how you train is going to be functional for playing rugby. And I think it's trying to be like a good role model and have more role models about sharing the positivity about your body and how it is.
You can still be feminine and play rugby, and we're athletes at the end of the day. Like, you don't have to be masculine or anything like that to play. And I think young girls looking to play, it shouldn't put them off.
It doesn't matter if you're male, it doesn't matter if you're female, whether you perceive it as feminine or masculine. Actually, it's a sport that you can get behind, you can really enjoy.
I remember having hand-me-downs from the men's team. So our rugby jerseys were the men's thirds or fourths rugby jerseys, and they were huge.
I think it's ignorant to try and think that if you can give us a men's kit and we can play in it, because at the end of the day you wouldn't see Owen Farrell running out in a size 16 shirt. Sometimes they think just giving them a little bit of the rope is good enough, but at the end of the day, just because we were born female, we were born a woman, doesn't mean we're any deserving than anyone else.
Thankfully now, over time, the technology behind sportswear has changed, and actually kit is now suitable for the individuals that play in it.
We know through our research with our partner Women in Sport that twice as many girls feel more uncomfortable in their kit than boys. So as well as providing people with the best kit their money can buy, we're launching a number of initiatives that will actually keep kids playing sport throughout their lives.
When I retired, my jersey definitely fit me and fit me well, to the point where no one could tackle me. But it is definitely now more appropriate. The kit is suitable for the athletes that are playing the sport.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
It's a sport that really can, I think, change people's lives. For me, it saved my life.
If Maggie can do it, I can do it.
So you were known on the pitch as a fearless tackler, and you have been credited as being the person who changed the public perception of women's rugby because you played more like a man.
Yeah, when I was playing, my nickname was Maggie the Machine.
Well, Maggie the Machine Alphonsi, that's a good starting point.
You know, Maggie epitomises everything that's great about women's rugby. For years, that icon of what the women's game was built on. She was that rough and ready girl on the back of the scrum, ready to chop down anything, put her head in any position.
She is an absolute workhorse. She understands the game. Like if you want to see people putting in big hits, it's going to be Maggie. If you want to see people breaking through to score great tries, it was Maggie.
She's definitely someone that you didn't want to be tackled by. She was the one that paved the way for putting in the big tackles in women's rugby back in the day. It's definitely seen a lot more now, but yeah, back then she was the one with the big hits.
She was outstanding, you know, tenacious, tough tackling back rower. You wouldn't want to mess with her on the pitch.
She was notoriously everywhere and would always stand out in club games. And then I remember for my first cap, I actually shared with Maggie, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm now getting my first cap, but I'm sharing a room with Maggie Alphonsi.
I would love to have played with Maggie. She would exaggerate all my strengths, and she would cover my weaknesses, and I would like to think I could do the same for her. I would love to have been her wingman.
I remember Maggie and her tackles and her involvement in the game. I was like, wow, what we were.
I remember standing on the sideline thinking to myself, thank God I'm not of the age to be able to be on there, because I really wouldn't want to tackle her.
I think the word legend sometimes gets used a little bit too often, but I think definitely a legend in that aspect of the game.
When people watch me play, I'd wear a scrum hat. So it wasn't about being a man or a woman, it was about being a really good rugby player. And now when you watch women's rugby, I don't see women playing it, I just see good athletes, and I think that's the most important thing. When people look at the sport, they see it as really aggressive, it looks ferocious, it looks quite violent. And I think when you play it, it doesn't feel like that. I guess you become so conditioned to it that actually a big tackle doesn't hurt. It just feels like I love the feeling of tackling someone, or actually I don't mind being tackled myself. I'd never really found myself worrying about that. And even now that I'm away from the sport, I'm not playing it anymore, I miss tackling, I miss being tackled. But for those who really want to get into the sport, look, honestly, it's not violent, it's not aggressive in that sense. It's a sport that really can, I think, change people's lives. You know, for me, it saved my life.
And at a grassroots level, does activity need to be ramped up to take rugby or tag rugby, touch rugby into more schools?
How do we get kids to go from that school environment where they know rugby, or they know the environment is comfortable and easy, to go into a club environment where it's a bit different, it's a bit novel, and that transition is usually the hardest bit.
Saracens High School is affiliated with Saracens. We're a normal state school. People talk a lot about the values at Saracens, and if you stop any of the pupils here at Saracens High School and ask them what are the values of Saracens, they'll be able to tell you our 4 values, and most importantly, they'll be able to tell you what they mean to them, what they mean to their success in life, and if they live those values, they'll reach their potential. We have a number of staff working here that are affiliated with the club that are also players. It's the values of the sport, like any sport, you know, it's what you can learn from that.
Sports is one of the few areas where, you know, children can be themselves, I think. Children can imagine what is possible in their lives. And if they happen to be really, really successful, they can do really positive things with that platform.
Starting at grassroots is where it all happens. You know, I think everybody has that memory of finishing training and having a chocolate bar at the end of it, and that's where it has to start. The role models exist out on a field like this at Twickenham, but actually the personalities, the people that drive people through, the people that drive the players through, that eventually make it here, are always the reason why they get to the very top.
Community engagement is absolutely crucial. It really is the bedrock of everything we do. We want to improve people's lives on, off the pitch, in our communities we work with. And for a long, long time, through our foundation and our community programmes, that has been a driving force behind a lot of what the club stands for.
Kids have such a great time, parents interacting, getting to know people in your local area, bringing it all back to, you know, one sort of core value, and that's just as key as the professional game. So yeah, get back out to your grassroots club, get involved, join another family.
I just want to make sure that there's more people out there who aren't into rugby will find it and realise that they can find their pathway.
She's an inspiration to all girls coming through, watching someone like Maggie, now listening to someone like Maggie on the TV as well. Who knows? In a few years' time, you might see the first female RFU president, which could be Maggie Alphonsi.
I think that sends a really clear and strong message out to other women within the game that actually, if Maggie can do it, I can do it.
I think Maggie could have one of the biggest impacts in English rugby that we've seen for a long time.
This woman is unstoppable. She is a force of nature. You know, she applies herself so well. She's a phenomenal role model. And her legacy is, you know, work hard for what you want to get. And secondly, be the best form of yourself as a human being that you can. Be kind. And that's her.
Your story is absolutely inspirational. I have no doubt that Artie will become the England captain if he's got anything like the drive that his mum has. Thank goodness for Lisa Burgess and the W6 bus. Thank you, Maggie Alphonsi.